My fiancée, Syed. She wasn't attracted to me anymore after I gained weight, so I lost the weight, the ring, and all interest in her explanations. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I've always thought my fiancée loved me for who I am, not just how I looked. We met in college, and for the first few years, everything felt easy, effortless, like we were two halves of the same person. I wasn't perfect, far from it, but I tried. I cooked, I listened, I laughed at her terrible jokes, and for a while, it felt like enough. But somewhere along the line, things changed. It wasn't one big moment. It was 100 little ones that built up into this invisible wall between us. I started noticing her glances when I sat down to eat, her quiet sighs when I mentioned skipping the gym, the way she'd comment, "Maybe we should eat lighter tonight." At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed, maybe I was overthinking, but it dug under my skin, a creeping worry that I couldn't shake. I started looking in the mirror more often, noticing the weight I had gained over the last few months. I told myself it was normal. I was busy with work, but the truth hurt more than I wanted to admit. The breaking point came one evening when we were supposed to celebrate our anniversary. I had spent hours planning a quiet dinner at home, candles, wine, her favorite playlist in the background. She walked in, smiled faintly, then sat down and, without warning, said the words that will haunt me forever. I don't feel attracted to you anymore. You've changed." My fork froze midair. I stared at her, trying to understand if she was joking or if I had misheard. But the expression on her face was calm, almost detached, like she was stating a fact about the weather. The room felt smaller, heavier, my chest tightened, and I could barely breathe. I wanted to scream, to beg her to explain, to tell her that I loved myself and her enough to fight for us, but the words wouldn't come. All I could feel was the sting of betrayal, the kind that cuts deeper than any insult. That night, I went to bed pretending I was fine, but inside, I knew something had cracked, and I couldn't put it back together. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about weight. This was about everything. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow, like someone had scraped the warmth out of my chest overnight. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus on work, couldn't even scroll my phone without her words replaying in my head. "I don't feel attracted to you anymore." I repeated it over and over as if saying it aloud might make it less real, but it didn't. It was carved into my mind, and every time I saw her, walking past me in our apartment, laughing at something on her phone, the sunlight catching her hair, I felt invisible, like I wasn't even a person anymore. I tried to talk to her. "Do you even realize what you just said?" I asked one evening, my voice shaky. She shrugged, scrolling on her phone. "I'm just being honest. You've let yourself go. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. The words stung worse than any insult I'd ever heard, because they came from someone I had trusted, someone who was supposed to be my partner in life. For the first time, I really saw her differently. There was no warmth, no empathy in her eyes, just cold assessment, like she was appraising an object she no longer wanted. I felt rage bubbling up, but it was mixed with this overwhelming sadness, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and makes your limbs feel like lead. My own reflection in the hallway mirror seemed unfamiliar. I touched my jaw, my stomach, my arms, wondering how she could stop seeing me as the person I had always been. I remember pacing the living room that night, the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of traffic outside mixing into this chaotic soundtrack in my head. I wanted to scream, slam something, make her see the devastation she had caused, but instead, I just sank onto the couch, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt before. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about attraction. She had been keeping score, silently judging me, and now she was using my insecurities as a weapon. I realized I could either crumble completely or fight back. But I had no idea what that fight would cost. I decided to try. Maybe if I changed, if I fixed what she said was broken, we could go back to the way things were. I joined a gym, started tracking every bite I ate, and forced myself into routines I had never cared about before. My body began to respond, muscles slowly forming where there had been flab, stamina creeping back into my lungs during long runs. But every time I looked in the mirror, I didn't just see progress. I saw her face, her judgmental eyes, her faint smirk the night she said she wasn't attracted anymore. She noticed. "You're really working hard, huh?" she said one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter, a hint of something in her tone I couldn't read. I nodded, swallowing a mix of hope and bitterness. "Yeah, I just want to feel better," I mumbled. She smiled faintly, and for a second I thought maybe things could go back. But then she added, almost casually, "I mean, it's good, I guess. But it's not just the weight, you know?" Those words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. Not just the weight? What else had I done wrong without realizing it? I started replaying every argument, every small disagreement, every moment I thought we were happy. Maybe I had been blind all along, ignoring subtle signs she wasn't as invested as I was. Every compliment felt like a tease. Every hug felt slightly off, like she was tolerating me rather than loving me. I spent nights on the treadmill, pounding the rubber belt beneath me, heart racing, mind racing faster. I wanted validation. I wanted her to notice, to tell me I was enough. But deep down, I also wanted to understand why someone I loved could suddenly look at me and see nothing but flaws. And with every drop of sweat, I realized something terrifying. The harder I worked for her approval, the further away it seemed. By the time I left the gym that night, drenched and exhausted, I knew one thing. This wasn't just about changing my body. It was about reclaiming control, even if I didn't yet know how. It didn't take long for her excuses to start piling up. Every compliment I thought was genuine now felt like a test I couldn't pass. "It's not just your weight," she'd say, arms crossed, voice casual like she was delivering weather news. "You've changed. Emotionally, I mean. You don't make me laugh like before. You're different." Different. The word lodged in my chest, heavy and suffocating. I had changed, yes, but all for her, all for us, and suddenly it was never enough. I started noticing the small betrayals I had brushed off before. She stayed late at work more often, or so she claimed, her phone always face down on the counter. Sometimes she would laugh at a text, a little too long, a little too secretive. My heart sank each time, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But the gut instinct, the cold, creeping suspicion, was impossible to ignore. One night I confronted her softly, trying to hold back the anger that was threatening to boil over. "Are you hiding something from me?" I asked. She looked up, startled, then sighed, leaning back against the sofa. "I just need space sometimes. You're so intense, always trying so hard. It's exhausting, exhausting." That word repeated in my mind, like a drumbeat, turning my frustration into something sharper, something angrier. I wanted to shout, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of the turmoil she had caused me. Yet, no matter how upset I was, a part of me still wanted her validation. I wanted her to say, "You're enough. You're perfect." But her words never came. Every day, I felt myself shrinking, losing pieces of the confident man I used to be, replaced by someone constantly questioning his worth. By the end of that week, the tension had grown unbearable. I realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't a temporary rough patch. It was a slow unraveling. And deep down, I knew the next revelation would hit even harder, something I wasn't ready to face. I found out the truth in the most humiliating way possible. I was grabbing my laptop one evening when a message notification popped up on her phone, left unlocked on the coffee table. I hesitated, a part of me knowing I shouldn't look, but the pit in my stomach was too deep to ignore. What I saw made my blood run cold. Flirty texts, subtle emojis, and inside jokes with someone she insisted was just a friend. Someone I had trusted. Someone I had loved. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the conversation, each word hitting me like a punch. "Wish you were here. Can't stop thinking about you. You're way hotter than him." I froze, staring at the screen, the room spinning around me. The wine glass she had left on the counter wobbled and tipped over, spilling red across the carpet unnoticed, because I couldn't focus on anything except the betrayal. When she walked in, I barely had the strength to speak. "Who is he?" My voice cracked, betraying my rage and heartbreak. She looked startled for a split second, then composed herself. "What are you talking about?" she asked, voice casual, almost rehearsed. My heart raced as I shoved the phone toward her. Her silence was louder than any words could be. Finally, she muttered, almost apathetically, "I just talk to him sometimes. It's nothing." Nothing. The way she said it, the casual shrug, made me feel smaller than I ever had. All the hours I had spent worrying about my weight, trying to change for her, trying to win back her attention, it was meaningless. She had been emotionally invested elsewhere while I was fighting for a love that no longer existed. I sank to the floor, head spinning, chest tight, unable to breathe. The betrayal wasn't just in her attraction fading. It was in the fact that she had moved on emotionally before I even realized there was a problem. And in that moment, I knew something had to change, but I had no idea how far I'd go to reclaim myself. I remember standing in front of the mirror that night, drenched in sweat from a run I didn't want to take, staring at my reflection as if trying to find the version of myself she claimed she no longer saw. My chest was tight, my jaw clenched, and for the first time in weeks I let myself cry. Not for her, not for the betrayal, but for me, for the part of myself I had lost in endless attempts to please someone who had already moved on. I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg for love, plead for validation, or shrink myself to fit someone else's fleeting standards. I would change, but not for her. I would change for me. I started waking up earlier, hitting the gym harder than ever, pushing through soreness and exhaustion. I swapped late-night junk food for meals I actually enjoyed and began discovering passions I had neglected. Painting, reading, even cooking my own meals just to feel some small ownership over my life. She noticed. At first, she commented casually, "You've been really busy lately." But there was something different now in her voice, an edge of curiosity, maybe even regret, and I realized that her approval didn't matter anymore. My reflection was starting to look like me again. Not the me she wanted, not the me she judged, but the me I had almost forgotten existed. I felt something stir inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Confidence. Not arrogant or showy, but quiet, unwavering. I walked taller, smiled more naturally, and laughed without waiting for her reaction. My friends noticed the difference too. They told me I seemed lighter, freer, happier, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was doing this to prove something to her. I was doing it to reclaim my life. But empowerment is a double-edged sword. The more I grew, the more aware I became of just how manipulative and cold she had been. And deep down, I knew that our next encounter, the one where we would face each other again, would be a reckoning I couldn't prepare for. A few weeks later, she finally noticed. I walked into the apartment after a late gym session, muscles sore, hair damp, and I caught the way she froze mid-step. Her eyes widened, scanning me from head to toe, lingering just a moment too long. "Wow," she murmured, almost unconsciously. That word, that simple, small word, hit me differently than anything she had ever said before. I felt a flicker of the old desire I had once had for her, but it was muted, cautious. She tried to compliment me, awkwardly at first. You look amazing." Maybe I overreacted before. Her tone wavered, unsteady, as if she was testing me. I just smiled faintly, sipping my water. "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. Inside, a part of me was screaming, "Notice me! Notice me!" But I didn't need her validation anymore. The control had shifted, and I could see it in her eyes. Surprise, maybe even regret. Her attempts escalated over the next few days. Late-night texts, "I've been thinking," calls that turned into long, meandering conversations filled with apologies she couldn't fully commit to. I listened, occasionally nodding, occasionally laughing softly at the absurdity. I realized something crucial. This wasn't attraction anymore. It was desperation. She was trying to reclaim what she had dismissed, and I was no longer hers to mold or manipulate. The apartment felt different when she was around. Tension crackling like static. She leaned closer than usual during conversations, touched my arm lightly, trying to gauge my reaction. But my mind was miles away, cataloging every slight, every lie she had told, every time she had made me feel less than I was. I was a different man now, stronger in ways she hadn't anticipated, and I could feel her uncertainty building. And yet, I knew this was far from over. Something told me that no matter how indifferent I acted, she wasn't done trying, and the next move would test everything I had fought to rebuild. It all came crashing down one night. I had spent weeks rebuilding myself, gym sessions, healthier routines, hobbies, late-night reflections, and for a fleeting moment, I felt untouchable. But she had a way of slicing through that confidence with a single word, a single look. That evening, she cornered me in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, voice soft but sharp. "I just don't understand why you've become so cold. You used to care so much. Now it's like you don't even want me." Her words hit me harder than any insult ever could. She had always been able to twist my emotions, to make me feel guilty for wanting validation, for wanting love. I stood there, heart pounding, chest tight, as the familiar fog of despair wrapped around me like a shroud. My hands shook and I could feel the old, insecure version of myself, the one who had begged for her approval, who had lost sleep over her judgment, creeping back. I wanted to scream, to break down, to tell her how deeply she had wounded me. But instead, I said nothing. I watched her, silent as her frustration grew at my distance, at my lack of reaction. "Why can't you just talk to me?" she demanded. I wanted to shout, "Because you don't care about what I feel." But the words stayed lodged in my throat. I sat on the edge of the sofa afterward, head in my hands, staring at the darkened room. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, a scent I used to crave but now only reminded me of manipulation and betrayal. My phone buzzed with another text from her, sweetly casual. "Can we talk tomorrow?" The message should have comforted me, but instead it felt like a noose tightening. In that moment, I realized how deeply I had allowed her to control my emotions, my life, my sense of worth. I had hit rock bottom, emotionally and mentally. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small spark flickered. I knew that if I survived this, I would emerge stronger. But first, I had to face her one final time. I couldn't take it anymore. Every apology, every attempt at manipulation, every fleeting compliment had become unbearable. That night, I told her we needed to talk, and I meant it this time. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the dim overhead light casting shadows that felt heavier than the silence between us. My chest tightened, my palms sweaty, but I forced myself to speak clearly. "I can't do this anymore," I said, voice steady but shaking. "I can't keep trying to earn your approval. I can't keep living in a relationship where I'm constantly measured and found lacking." She blinked, eyes wide like she hadn't expected this. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. I let out a long breath and leaned in, letting the weight of all the weeks, months, and years settle into my words. "You told me you weren't attracted to me because I gained weight. You flirted with someone else while I was here, trying to be the man you wanted. I gave everything, and it's still not enough for you." She tried to interrupt, her voice rising. "I never said it was about anyone else. I held up my hand. "No, I've heard enough excuses. I've listened to all the justifications, the manipulations, the half-truths. I'm done." My voice shook, but I felt stronger than I had in months. Every ounce of despair, every sleepless night, every tear I had shed fueled me now. She gasped, a mix of shock and desperation, trying to reach across the table. I pulled back instinctively. "The engagement is over. The ring is gone. Your explanations don't matter anymore." My words landed like a hammer, and the weight of finality hung between us. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. The anger, the heartbreak, the betrayal, they were mine to process, but they no longer controlled me. And as I stood up, ready to leave that apartment and that chapter behind, I realized something I hadn't believed in months. I was finally in charge of my life. The days after I walked away felt surreal. At first, the apartment was too quiet, too empty, like the echoes of our arguments were still bouncing off the walls. I slept longer than usual, cooked for myself, and spent hours just staring out the window trying to make sense of the whirlwind of betrayal and heartbreak. But slowly, I began to notice something remarkable. I wasn't crushed anymore. I wasn't consumed by her manipulation or weighed down by the constant need to please someone who never appreciated me. I started reclaiming little pieces of myself. I went out with friends I had neglected, laughing without hesitation, telling stories that didn't require anyone's approval. I joined a cooking class, painting workshops, and even started a small side project I had shelved years ago. My body continued to change too. Not just the weight I had shed, but the way I carried myself, the way my posture exuded confidence. Each small victory reminded me that I was capable of more than I had realized. Sometimes I caught glimpses of her, through mutual friends, social media, or the occasional text, but I didn't respond. The pull to engage, to explain, to justify myself was gone. I had learned something critical. My life didn't depend on her recognition. My worth wasn't determined by her approval or attraction. Evenings became my sanctuary. I'd run along the river, feeling the crisp air in my lungs, the steady rhythm of my heartbeat reminding me I was alive, and that I was finally living for myself. There were moments of loneliness, yes, and pangs of regret for the time lost. But they were tempered with relief, clarity, and a sense of power I hadn't felt in years. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew she wasn't finished. Her regret would come eventually, and when it did, I had to be ready, not to fall back, but to face it with the strength I had fought so hard to reclaim. It didn't take long for her to notice the distance I had put between us. One afternoon, I received a text that made my stomach twist. "Can we talk? I've been thinking about everything." Normally, I would have ignored it, but a small part of me, curiosity, maybe the remnants of old feelings, made me pause. I didn't respond immediately. I waited, letting the anticipation build, letting her words linger like a shadow in my mind. When she finally called, her voice was soft, almost vulnerable. I think I made a huge mistake," she said, her tone shaking in a way I hadn't heard before. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. My hands tightened around the phone, a mix of anger, disbelief, and a strange flicker of old attachment coursing through me. I could hear the attempts at sincerity, the regret she had tried to mask for months behind casual conversation and subtle manipulations. She begged, gently this time, for a chance to explain herself. "I never meant to hurt you, I got scared and I didn't handle it the right way," she murmured. I sat there in silence, letting the words wash over me, letting the weight of her regret settle like an uncomfortable fog. I could sense the urgency now, the desperation, the fear that she had finally realized what she had lost. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't the same person who had once bent over backward for her validation. I could feel the power in my chest, the confidence, the independence, the clarity I had fought so hard to reclaim. And in that moment, I understood that no amount of apologies, no flood of regret, could erase the betrayal or the months of emotional exhaustion she had caused. I took a deep breath and let her words hang in the air, unanswered. Her regret was hers, not mine to fix. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the final chapter of this story was about to be written, but on my terms, not hers. The final encounter wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet, almost mundane, and that's what made it hit so hard. We met at the cafe we used to go to, the one where laughter had once filled the air. She arrived first, fidgeting with her coffee cup, eyes darting up the street as if expecting something, anything, to have changed me. I walked in, tall, calm, measured, feeling the confidence that had been absent for months. "I came to say, I'm sorry," she started, words careful, rehearsed. "I shouldn't have treated you the way I did. I see now how much I hurt you." I let the silence stretch between us, savoring the power of being untouchable to her manipulation. "I hear you," I said finally, voice steady, "but saying sorry doesn't undo the choices you made. It doesn't erase the betrayal or the pain, and I've realized I don't need it to move on." Her face fell, a mix of shock and disbelief. She reached out, a desperate attempt at connection, but I stepped back, my boundaries firm. I realized in that moment that my empowerment wasn't about revenge or proving anything to her. It was about reclaiming myself, my time, my love, my energy. The engagement, the ring, the late-night arguments, The sleepless nights, they were behind me. I walked out of that cafe with the sun warming my shoulders, lungs filled with crisp, clean air, and a heart finally light. There was no dramatic shouting, no pleas, no tears from me, just calm, unshakable confidence. I had fought, fallen, rebuilt, and emerged stronger. And, for the first time in months, I felt truly free. She stayed inside, staring after me, perhaps realizing what she had lost, perhaps not. But it no longer mattered. My life was mine again, untethered from her judgment, her attraction, or her conditional love. I had learned the hardest lesson in the cruelest way. Your worth is never defined by someone else's fleeting desire, and sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do,